So someone called Harry's call for aid corridors to Gaza a diplomatic disaster waiting to happen. A diplomatic disaster. Imagine asking for food and medicine to reach children who are starving and dying, and someone calls it a diplomatic disaster. Harry was in Jordan, as we know, at the invitation of the World Health Organization. He visited refugee camps, he met children who had been evacuated from Gaza, and he saw amputees who lost limbs to all those bombs. He spoke to doctors and humanitarian workers on the ground. And when he asked about the situation, he said that food and medical aid should definitely be reaching Gaza urgently in order to help the people. Now, this is a man who's advocating for starving children to receive food, a man who called for medical supplies to reach people who are injured and dying, a man using his considerable platform to amplify a humanitarian crisis that the world is watching unfold. But apparently, to certain people and derangers, this is not acceptable, because this is apparently Harry overstepping, and this is apparently a disaster waiting to happen. Having said that, I want to take you back a bit and tell you about an actual diplomatic disaster. Think back to March 2022, when the other brother and the other girl went on their horrible and totally disastrous tour of the Caribbean. This was meant to be a charm offensive. This was meant to shore up support for the monarchy in the Commonwealth realms. And this was supposed to be the other brother and the other girl doing what they do best, which is apparently showing up and looking good. However, as many of us remember, it did not go well at all. It was one of the worst disasters that I'd ever seen when it came to royal tours. Because in Jamaica, and God bless Jamaica for this, the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, actually told them to their faces that Jamaica was moving on. In fact, I remember he didn't even let them take a seat. They were standing, he was standing, and in front of the world cameras, he said to them, "We are moving on." He said Jamaica intended to become a fully independent republic. Ouch! He said that they were ditching the British monarchy as head of state. So imagine your grandmother sends you on a simple errand and you couldn't even deliver. And I'm so proud that the Prime Minister said that to their faces on camera and during their official visit. That was a truly disastrous diplomatic tour. It was terrible. And the Prime Minister of a Commonwealth realm looking at the future King and Queen and saying, "We do not want you anymore. We are leaving. We do not want to be part of you. And the monarchy means nothing to us." That burn, no amount of aloe vera can soothe it. And it wasn't just Jamaica. In Belize, they had a part of the tour cancelled because of protests. Local communities were actively objecting to the visit, and the people did not want them to be there. In the Bahamas, yes, in the Bahamas. See, this is why I love records, right? And this is...
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sussex Insights. First of all, I owe you an apology. I've missed you. Truly. To my Day One subscribers, to the silent watchers, to the comment section family, thank you for sticking around. I know I haven't been posting consistently, and I appreciate your patience more than you know. Life happens, growth takes time, and sometimes stepping back allows clarity. But today, I'm back, and we need to talk. Because once again, we're watching language being twisted, headlines being weaponized, and compassion being reframed as controversy. Let's get into it. Recently, there were headlines suggesting that Prince Harry's call for humanitarian aid corridors into Gaza was somehow a diplomatic disaster waiting to happen. A diplomatic disaster. Let's pause right there. Now, here's what actually happened. Prince Harry was in Jordan at the invitation of the World Health Organization. He met with doctors, he visited refugee camps, he listened to humanitarian workers, he saw injured civilians, including children receiving treatment, and after listening, he said something simple. He said that food and medical aid should urgently reach civilians who are suffering. That's it. No rogue negotiations, no secret treaties, no shadow diplomacy. He advocated for humanitarian access. And somehow that became controversial. Let's ask the obvious question. Since when did saying children need food become reckless? If calling for medical supplies to reach the wounded is a diplomatic catastrophe, what exactly qualifies as diplomacy? Because historically, diplomacy has included advocating for peace, humanitarian access, and civilian protection. Those are not radical ideas. They're foundational principles recognized globally. What makes this different? Is it the statement, or is it the speaker? Because here's where things get interesting. When Prince Harry speaks about veterans through the Invictus Games, he's praised worldwide. When he speaks about mental health, he's seen as groundbreaking. When he talks about trauma, resilience, or service, the headlines glow. But when he speaks about civilians in a war zone needing aid, suddenly he's overstepping. Compassion doesn't change depending on geography. Humanitarian principles don't expire at borders. And this is where framing becomes the real story. Let's talk about the phrase diplomatic disaster. That's emotionally loaded language. It suggests broken alliances, political chaos, international backlash. Did that happen? No ambassadors were recalled. No governments issued condemnations. No official alliances were disrupted. So what exactly was the disaster? A humanitarian appeal? Because here's the truth. Harry was not speaking on behalf of the British government. He holds no diplomatic office. He was not negotiating policy. He was amplifying what doctors and aid workers were already saying. And here's something important. Jordan invited him. The World Health Organization engaged him. That context matters. Now let's zoom out for a moment. Throughout modern royal history, advocacy has often intersected with policy conversations. King Charles III spent decades speaking about climate change long before it was politically comfortable. Prince William leads the Earthshot Prize, which inherently touches on environmental legislation and international cooperation. No one calls environmental advocacy a diplomatic disaster. So why is humanitarian advocacy framed differently? This is where narrative management enters the conversation. When someone operates outside of a tightly controlled institutional framework, their independence can feel unsettling to observers who prefer scripted messaging. Harry operates with moral autonomy now. He speaks freely. He doesn't wait for palace approval. And freedom, especially in high-profile families, can make people uncomfortable. But independence does not equal recklessness. In fact, independence can mean authenticity. Let's also acknowledge something about Meghan. Before she ever married into royalty, Meghan was advocating for women's rights and gender equality. From her UN Women's speech to her early activism, advocacy is not new territory for her or Harry. Their work has consistently centred vulnerable communities, Veterans, women, children, mental health, racial equity, now humanitarian access. There is a pattern and its service. Now, does supporting humanitarian aid mean endorsing any government or political faction? No. And that distinction is critical. Calling for food, water and medical access for civilians aligns with international humanitarian principles. It is not a partisan position. It is a human one. But outrage sells. Diplomatic disaster generates clicks. Public figure expresses empathy, does not. We are living in an era where escalation drives engagement. Calm statements don't trend. Dramatic adjectives do. And here's what I think is really happening. When Harry speaks independently on global issues, it disrupts the narrative that he is reckless or irrelevant. It reinforces the reality that he still has global influence. And that influence isn't easily controlled. That shift unsettles some commentators. But here's the thing about exaggerated headlines: they eventually collapse under scrutiny. Strip away the dramatic phrasing and what remains? Children need food. The injured need medicine. Aid corridors save lives. If that's controversial, then perhaps the definition of controversy needs re-evaluation. Now, I want to be clear. Supporting Harry and Meghan does not mean ignoring nuance in global politics. It means recognizing when empathy is being reframed as extremism for engagement purposes. It means asking critical questions. Compared to what? Compared to actual diplomatic breakdowns? Compared to scandals that required crisis containment? Compared to tours that sparked public declarations of constitutional change? Perspective matters, and authenticity matters. One thing that resonates with many people around the world is that Harry and Meghan consistently centre human impact over optics. That doesn't mean they are perfect. It means their pattern of work is consistent. Service, advocacy, amplification of marginalised voices. That consistency is difficult to dismiss. So no, I don't see a diplomatic disaster. I see a humanitarian appeal. I see someone using his platform to amplify doctors and aid workers. And I see a media ecosystem that sometimes prefers drama over depth. But here at Sussex Insights, we choose depth. We choose perspective. We choose critical thinking over reactionary headlines. And most importantly, we choose compassion. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think calling for humanitarian aid qualifies as diplomatic recklessness? Or do you think language like disaster is being stretched beyond recognition? Let's talk about it respectfully in the comments. And before we close again, thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with this channel. Thank you for your patience during my absence. If you appreciate thoughtful breakdowns like this, where we analyse framing, examine context, and yes, add a little humour along the way, make sure you like the video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share your thoughts. And if you'd like to support the channel further, your engagement genuinely makes a difference. We're building a space here that values nuance over noise. Because sometimes the biggest story isn't what was said, it's how it was spun. And we're not buying the spin anymore. I've missed you all, and we're just getting started.